Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting this August 7th, 2018. We have all 7 Planning Commissioners present, and we welcome city staff and public here. We're grateful you're here to participate in the public process and look forward to serving you and hearing from what you have to say during this meeting. We have 2 items on our consent calendar. 1A, approving minutes of July 17th, 2018, and 1B, Oak Ridge Park, deferral of construction of road improvements. Commissioner Quinney.
Yes, thank you. I move that we approve both of the items on the consent calendar.
Commissioner Green.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Quinney and a second by Commissioner Green. Do we have any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's please vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 7-0, bringing us to our first public hearing. Express Car Wash, 7165 South, Redwood Road, preliminary site plan in a CG zone. Gary Peterson is the applicant. Are you here this evening? Please feel welcome and invited to come forward and present your application.
Okay, first of all, thanks, Chair and Commissioners. This is a typical, what they call express exterior car wash, where you come in, go through automated pay stations, go through the tunnel. It pulls you through the tunnel. This is actually a belt conveyor, so you'll be on a belt and go through the tunnel and then go through and have free vacuums with the boom vacuum. So we've met with UDOT and kind of addressed their access and ingress and egress from Redwood, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Peterson this evening? We'll give you some time after the public comment section if there's anything you'd like to address.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Elgin, you have this item for the city?
Good evening, Commissioners. As Mr. Peterson said, it's a car wash going into the CG Zone District on Redwood Road, directly across from DI. The parcel is currently going through an administrative process for a minor subdivision, and we expect that to be final next week. The application meets all of our zoning requirements, and we recommend approval of the project.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Elgin, commencing with Commissioner Green?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to do that.
No problem. Commissioner Quinney.
Mine's a clarification, and this is just me remembering from the design review committee. On here, we have the parcel listed, showing where it is. In our staff packet, in my recollection, was that it was actually the southern half of the next parcel up, where it butts up against Beeman Street and Alleyway. And that's what we're showing in our staff packet. I just want to make sure that we're talking about the right parcel.
Yes, the staff packet's correct. I'm sorry.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Quinney did get kind of the answer I wanted, because they won't, the staff report states that they will be entering and exiting not onto Redwood Road, but onto Beacom.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for staff? Well, we'll open this up to the public hearing now. If you would like to speak on this item, please feel welcome to come forward at this time. And sir, if you could please state your name and address for the public record.
My name is Steve Ekman, 1629 West Beeman Street.
Thank you.
Now, what was that last comment? They're going to enter off of Beeman and not off of Redwood? Beeman is a gated community, and we have some real concerns about that. Off of Redwood Road, it's a gated community. There's not going to be any access to that location from Beeman Street.
Okay, thank you. We'll get a clarification on that after the public hearing.
Yeah, I have 3 concerns. Number 1, the traffic, because it's the main gate to our community. Number 2, the noise. How long is this going to be open all day? And number 3, what it's going to do to our property values. Those are my 3 main concerns, and I hope someone can talk to us about that tonight.
Great, thank you for voicing those. We'll definitely address those.
Thank you.
We hear you, sir. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this item?
My name is Amy Peden, and I am at 7161 Calais Villas Way. So my home overlooks directly the property that we're looking at today. So this is definitely a concern for me. I already have a lot of noise that I hear from Redwood Road and businesses across the street, which I can live with those. I bought the house when those were there. But with a car wash, that's gonna make a lot of noise. And as Steve said, affect my property value. How do I sell my home in a few years when people walk through and they're hearing the car wash going all day? So those are, again, my concerns.
Thank you. We appreciate your input. Anyone else have anything new to interject?
Hello and thank you. My name is Adam Hawasli and I reside in 7159 South Beeman Street. And I have few concerns as Steve and Amy have expressed, especially the residents of Somerset Villas. Most of them are aware of the situation. They are worried about few things here that I can go over. The substantial increase of traffic and noise from this project. We have nothing against a car wash. We all use car washes. They're great. It's just the fact that we happen to be a neighborhood adjacent to this project. That's why the neighbors are showing concerns. Another point is the nonstop noise of these power washers and industrial vacuum cleaners. The emissions and pollution increase due to cars idling there while they're washing their cars or drying, using the vacuum cleaner, etc. The patrons there, because Steve mentioned the point where we don't know what are the hours of this car wash, how late they'll be open. From experience, patrons will sit there and clean in their cars, blasting their car radio. So that would be a concern, especially people that are right next to the project, just separated by a wall. This, of course, will most likely, in my estimation personally, will reduce the real estate value of all the residents in Somerset Villas. And one thing, this is the question that I'm wondering. The contaminated wastewater, how will it go to the drain? Because we happen to have a water retention area next to our neighborhood. We don't know if that water will flow underneath our homes or what. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your input. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment section, and let's please ask city staff to address some of these issues just for all of our benefit. Mr. Nelson with engineering, wastewater, would you like to take that one, drainage?
It's required to go in the sewer system. It's not allowed to go in the storm drain system.
Great, thank you. And then we'll hear from the applicant on hours of operation, but Ms. Elgin, for purposes of what we're looking at, this is allowed in the current zoning?
Yes, this is a permitted use.
Okay, so permitted use. So again, we always have the quandary of the rights of the current property owner versus the rights of the adjacent property owners. It's always that tough conundrum. The concern about potential property values, I mean, I don't know if we can clearly speak to that since it's not necessarily inherent in our discussion. It could potentially be an amenity for the community. It could potentially bring it down. Let's see, speaking on traffic with the gated community, ingress, egress, potential trips. Anyone want to speak on that? Would that be more Mr. Nelson, or would that be you, Ms. Elgin?
I'd like to let the applicant respond to that primarily, but I will just recall off memory, when that private community was built, it was constructed as a private road. At the time, the the developer that built that community also owned this subject parcel and was considering a Family Dollar or some kind of dollar store for that location. Yes, it's a private road, and a private road is used for those that have private interests. And it was our understanding that the owner of this parcel has the same private interest in that road as the residents who live there.
Okay, thank you. And looking at the staff report, a traffic study has not been done, correct? Because that's not what we would do at this juncture.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And just for the public's knowledge, all of this has already been considered in bringing it to this point, but understandably, you might not have read the staff report where all of this engineering has already been looked at. We certainly want to address residents' questions. Does anybody have any other question for staff before we bring the applicant back up?
So just to verify, the street is still a private street, but the property owner the applicant has access to the street because that's part of the property in that development, correct?
That is my understanding, but I would definitely welcome to hear his explanation.
Okay, thank you. Could we please have Mr. Peterson come back up and address the specific areas of the traffic, how many trips through the car wash each day you envision, given your historical business model, the ingress egress from the community, your hours of operation for the noise?
Okay. The hours of operation it's pretty standard for these washes, which in the winter, it's, be around 6 p.m. As it changes a little, gets a little darker toward the summer, it might be as late as 8 p.m. is typically what they are. They open at 7 p.m. or 7 a.m.
7 a.m. to 6 or 8 p.m.
6 or 8, depending on the time of year.
Okay,
That's when
thank
they
you.
typically are. As far as traffic trips, we're, don't know, you're kind of estimating, we're hoping, just don't know. I mean, a couple hundred maybe, I don't know, just to, don't know, really can't say exactly how much traffic will be there. We do, for what we have done is with this belt conveyor, we try to abate the noise as well, because typically you'll have dryers at the end of the wash. We're putting them back in the wash and having a tire shine at the end. So you don't have dryers right at the end. I have talked with one of the homeowners there directly to our south. And we've agreed with them. We'll be putting a precast concrete wall similar to what's already there on the back of the two properties to the south. And one of those property owners asked for a little higher trees, larger trees to be put in, so we'll be doing that. And also they asked for an evergreen, and I said we could do that subject to the city's approved tree list. What if they, as opposed to a deciduous tree.
Well, thank you. So if I'm understanding correctly, you've engaged in conversation with the surrounding community regarding this?
Yeah, haven't met with all of them, but the ones directly adjacent to, on the south side and the east side, I've gone through and tried to contact most of them, probably hit them, more than half, not 100%, not 100% were there when I went through. And, like I said, the one had, from their deck, just asked for a taller tree, and talked to the two with the fence and tried to address whatever concerns we could.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Peterson? Commissioner England.
Having been to these, there's usually signage to address one of the concerns one of the citizens had about people blaring their music and idling for long periods of time. Do you have like a signage with like capping the time people should be there? Or, I've seen signs at some of these places that say, please respect others and keep your vacuuming to a limited amount of time.
Limit your use to do that. And we can also post signs about the music, and we haven't typically had that as a problem, but we can post signs about no loud music, and then we can enforce that because we have people on site at all times. So I can do that.
Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. Question on Beaman Street. Residents said that it was a gated community. Where is the gate in relationship to where they would be entering?
The gate is, it's hard to see. You see where our entrance is? The gate is about 5 or 8 feet to the east of where our entrance is, and it swings into the subdivision.
Swings in. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
And as far as the access, our property line goes to the center line of Beaman, and there is a common access with the home, the homeowner. It's a shared access agreement with the homeowners there.
Anything else for Mr. Peterson? Thank you for addressing that. Appreciate it. Let's discuss among the commission. Commissioner Green.
So I'm going to jump in here. Just for those of you that live in the area, so you understand where we are coming from and what we're doing, this is a site plan approval. The business is that business is allowed to be there by ordinance. As you heard Ms. Elgin talk about this, because it's zoned, the CG zone, there's a multitude of businesses that can go along Redwood Road there. We can't stop those, and nor on some of these would I attempt to. So because it's a site plan, we have some very specific criteria that we have to look at to see if this meets the city ordinance, and that's what our task is. We understand your concerns that you may not like that kind of business in your backyard, but we have no control over that because that's permitted by ordinance. It could, it could be a restaurant. It could be there's lots of things that could go in there that are permitted in that particular zone. With that being said, I've looked through the 7 criteria that we're required by ordinance to look at, and I assume based on your talks, Commissioner Quinney, this has been to the Design Review Committee and got a favorable look?
Notes are at the back of the packet.
Okay, so based on all of that, I can't see anything that would preclude me from voting. If Mr. Peterson wants to put up signage, wants to be a good neighbor, doing some of those kinds of things, I think that's a good idea, but we can't require the signage. We can't do any of that because this is just a site plan, and we're looking at the flow of the traffic, and obviously there were some issues with ingress, egress on Redwood Road, and we want to make sure that we don't have too many driveways on Redwood Road because that just messes it up. So, and given the fact that the property line stretches to the middle of the street, they get to use the street as much as the neighbors do to get to their property with the shared use agreement that they obviously have in place. So I understand your concerns, but unfortunately you may not like this answer, but I will be voting for this because I don't think we have I don't think there's anything in the criteria that would prevent us from voting for this on this particular piece of property.
Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you. Ms. Elgin, I do have a question for you. I realize it went to the Development Review Committee. Ordinance requires any wall longer than 50 feet have a pop out or some kind of break. The south elevation does not appear to have any of that. And that is required by ordinance, anything longer than 50 feet.
Okay. We will, is that your architect?
I can speak to this.
Okay.
Commissioner Quinney, if you wouldn't mind muting your
We talked about this in design review committee. I was gonna weigh in anyway, so I'll just do this now. We talked about this. This is gonna be up against tall fence on the south side. Nobody's gonna see this. We talked about it and we debated it and decided it wasn't something that was necessary in this case. Nobody's gonna see it. What's the point of making them put in windows or pop outs and having this extra expense when nobody's going to see this backside of this building? If you, in looking through the notes, I'm just reminding myself, this was a month ago, we had them enlarging some of these windows on the front side. We were fighting as much as we could as a design review committee, as much as we can as a planning commission, to make this a nice project, understanding full well that whether we like it or whether we don't like it is really irrelevant, but what we can control is what it looks like. And that's what I think we've done as a planning commission, as a design review committee. I mean, if there's something in code that says we have to put something there, I mean, I'm sure that the applicant's been very open to every suggestion that we've given him, and he's taken those, I think done a very good job with those, but I just don't see any need for us to force some extra expense on this case.
Commissioner Hanson?
It's ordinance. Are we just going to ignore the ordinance? Because if we ignore it here, we're going to ignore it someplace else. When we did the Maverick on 13th and 70th, their rear wall had to have the pop-outs or whatever, and it's against a tall wall. No matter what, it is ordinance, anything longer than 50 feet. So once we started ignoring ordinances, what good are they?
The United Market is the same thing. It went up against another building and we let it go. I mean, when you can't see it, there's no point in having.
Well, then we should change the ordinance. I'm one that believes the ordinance is there for a reason. It was voted on, and we either obey the ordinances or we don't have them.
Commissioner Green?
So what, do we have the exact wording of the ordinance for that particular thing do we know which section that is?
I bet you one of the planners could probably find it quicker than I can, but I'll look for it.
Anybody know right off the top?
While they're looking for it, I think the one principle that keeps being brought up that's in state code is in section 10-9A-509, where it says that if an applicant is entitled to approval of a land use application if the application conforms to the requirements. So just kind of as a side note while we're finding that ordinance, that it was brought up a couple of times in citizen comments about, well, what if it affects their land use values or something else? Well, as far as your process as a planning commission, you cannot take that into account. All you can take into account is what are the ordinances. If they meet the ordinances, you have to approve of it. If they don't meet the ordinances, then you don't approve of it, which is why I think that this is a really good discussion, because you are talking about a specific ordinance of the every 50 feet that you have some pop out or other features. So we probably ought to go back to the actual wording of the ordinance, and then you can decide how you can follow
We
it.
have that up.
Okay.
It says facades greater than 50 feet long, measured horizontally, shall incorporate wall plane projections or recesses when they face a public or private street, or are adjacent to any residential zone.
Which this
And
one
that-
is.
There are, where did
The properties to the south that makes it adjacent to a residential zone, correct? Yeah. Well, if code calls for it. Well, if the ordinance, I tend to agree with you philosophically that it's gonna be facing a wall. But I also agree with Commissioner Hanson that if the ordinance requires that we do not have the authority, correct me if I'm wrong, city, we don't have the authority to waive the ordinance there.
Yeah, unless the ordinance itself gives you that authority. I mean, if there was an additional clause in the ordinance that says that, you know, in instances where it's not visible, Planning Commission, you know, has the ability to waive it, but it doesn't say that. So you're right, unless it's built right into the ordinance, or somewhere in the powers that you have, which are in Title II of city ordinances, which I don't know of anything there either that would authorize you, then yes, you have to follow the ordinance.
And on this one, we're the approving authority. This isn't a recommendation that goes to the city council.
Right.
So I think we have to be.
You have to be especially careful
Careful
where
with
you're
that.
not making just a recommendation, but a final decision. That's correct.
Right, because if we were just recommending, we could say we understand the ordinance, but in this case, there are certain criteria that might not apply, similar to what we do on the Board of Adjustment. But I would agree. I agree, in a way it doesn't make sense, but I agree that because it's code, until the code is changed, we need to follow the code. Stick to the code. So if it's 127 feet long, do there need to be 2 pop-outs? Is it every 50 feet? It's more of a guideline than rules.
Hold on.
So we're just trying to figure out what the
Chairman Pack, it
minimum is
says,
that we could do.
It says, Mr. Peterson is willing to concede and add pop-outs minus the windows to match the north elevations. So he's willing to add pop-out. We'll just put that as a condition, put this whole thing to bed right now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree.
So, and also, most of the car wash is adjacent to a commercial zone. There's a very, very small portion of the rear is adjacent to residential. And so I think that, that being said, I think that was the decision we came to at the Design Review Committee, since most of it was adjacent to commercial and not residential. Yeah.
Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you. I'm certainly not against this, and I think that the elevations are very nice. I just know what ordinance is, and as a planning commission, we don't have the right to go against ordinance. It's not that I'm against this at all. I think your elevations look very nice. Well, this is it's horizontal. It's not.
You need to come up with a microphone and state that so it can be recorded, please.
My name is Grant Golightly. I'm an architect that was working with Mr. Peterson on this. So on this south elevation, the overall length of the entire building is 127 feet. You can see the part that is the brick that is the 26'8" plus or minus. There is some projection vertically from the face of the building there. That's at the commercial part of the zone. What this elevation does not reflect is some minor modifications to some setbacks that have been worked out with planning. You can see it on the site plan, but at the right end of that south elevation, we actually have had to bring in the elevation about 10 feet for where this occurs, so there is some more variation in the building than what this particular elevation represents. It was just presented before the deadline to get it into you. So there are some variations. And Mr. Peterson has said if his hand is forced, we would represent the north, those 2 pop-outs with the red portion that just stick out a few, just to give it some additional interest if it was required.
It is required.
So per the one commissioner's comment that 90% of this elevation is up against a commercial property. There is the one portion that has a residential face to it, and that is the part that has that 10-foot setback. So that there are some additional variations, at least in that portion of the building.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Hanson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Would anyone like to offer a motion?
Sure, I will.
Commissioner Drain.
Based on the information and findings set forth in staff report and on the evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission approve the preliminary site plan for Express Car Wash located. So what's the is this 7187 or 7165? I'm going to clarify that before I finish the motion.
It is 7187. With the new subdivision, it got a new address.
Okay. Located at 7187 South Redwood Road in the ZC, General Commercial Conditions of Zoning Zone District, subject to conditions of approval 1 through 4 of the staff report, plus condition 5, that the south-facing wall have the matching pop-ups of the north elevation as depicted in the staff report.
And just a clarification, so we are saying that it'll be matching,
It'll be the
just
same
like the
type.
north? Okay. Cause,
Doesn't need the windows, but it's the pop-up matching the north.
okay, pop-up matching, but no windows necessary. Thank you. Commissioner Hatch.
I'll second that, thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Green, a second by Commissioner Hatch with clarifying, or are you amenable to that? No windows, but the pop-outs. Great. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Thank you, citizens, for your input. We highly appreciate it and consider it. And thank you, Mr. Peterson, for doing business in West Jordan. Next item on our calendar this evening on the agenda is Sunset Villas, 7292 South Redwood Road, preliminary subdivision plat, 17 lots on 2.78 acres, and preliminary development plan in an R38 SHO zone. Cannon and Company, Gary Cannon, is the applicant. Mr. Cannon, please feel welcome to come forward and present your application this evening.
Thank you, distinguished council. I was hoping more people would have got up and walked out. I apologize. I just got off a plane a couple hours ago. We've been working on this property with your administration for about 7-8 months now. We understand, or I understand, that this property has been brought before you on numerous occasions. I don't know exactly how many. I've heard 2 or 3 or 4 probably. A lot of it's outdistanced a lot of you that are sitting here today. You know me well enough to know that I like to do good stuff in West Jordan, and I'm following suit again here. This is going to also be an empty nester community, 17 lots. We've listened to your feedback on a number of occasions now. We've put in some park area. We've added lots of trees, some benches. I would like to make a couple of comments, because I know some of the neighbors have had some concerns about this. We have the property bordering us to the south is, I didn't know there was a density called very high density in West Jordan, but I just found that out. So there's apartments, and there's nothing wrong with apartments, but we're not doing apartments here. This particular zoning, from what I understand, the master plan zoning would call for, or let us have the ability to apply for up to 10 units per acre, of which, of those 10, they could be attached, or townhomes. There's nothing wrong with townhomes, but we are asking for a zoning of single-family homes. Our initial projections in price are probably going to be start around $350,000. In your packet, I believe you all have, or maybe we can click it up there. We've got some ideas of floor plans. We have worked very, very closely with and as you're aware, I'm on the Planning Commission in Riverton City, so I feel your pain when somebody stands before you, and I'll tell you, I'm just as nervous standing in front of you as I am sitting behind you. So thank you for listening to me. But we've went to great lengths to create some plans that are kind of unique to the area and to the city. We've tried to incorporate a front porch in, I take that back, a porch either on the front of the home or the rear of the home or both. So as you look at these plans, now these are examples of what our intent to put in there is. The yards, this will be maintained by an HOA. The yards will be taken care of by the HOA. And I went to the Extreme today, and if you don't mind, I'm going to bring this forward for you. This home was recently put on the market. It's a home in West Jordan. It's on a project on about 9200 South and 20th West. It is a multi-family retirement community. What I'd like to point out, and as you know, I am in real estate. I do own a real estate company here in the town of West Jordan. My grandparents moved here in the 30s, and I just can't seem to leave here. But that particular home in front of you, if you can read a Realtor MLS worksheet, that has just a little over 1,000 square feet on one level for $335,000. That is an attached home in the town of West Jordan. I also am fortunate I'm marketing a project out in Riverton right now of townhomes, and I can tell you that as many as 6 out of 10 people that come through the door are empty nesters. And I'm embarrassed to say this, they don't even come in and ask me the price. They walk through the door and ask if there's a main floor master bedroom, and we tell them no, they walk out. And it's a very nice product in Riverton. Again, I've given you a lot of statistics. I want to give you some more because you guys also, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a numbers guy, but I am about statistics. The useful life of a home averages about 12 to 15 years. When you get to that point, the home, you have 3 options as a homeowner. You can let it be the way it is. You can spend thousands and thousands of dollars of remodeling, or you can move. And the empty nester homeowner is having a very difficult time because they're getting to that point with these big homes that they own, and they don't have viable options. So when I come to you with these, there is a lot of time and energy and legwork on my part to try and bring a product that you would be very proud of. And believe me, when I come in and say we're asking for 6 units per acre of single family homes, when we're going to a zoning that would allow up to 10 units per acre of multifamily homes, I do have the community's best interest in mind here, and it's strictly not from an economic standpoint. I think this is something that both myself and you and anyone who lives here will be very proud to live in. I got a call yesterday from a nice lady, Linda Sorich, and I was in San Diego. I do stem cell treatments in Tijuana every 6 months, and we had a great conversation. I don't even know if she knew I was there or not, but I explained to her. And you're also aware of this. I'm the president of the South Jordan Canal. The South Jordan Canal feeds these properties. I can tell you that the system, the 60 or 70-year-old system that was in place in Drake Lane right now is being redone. This property has an open ditch. It's going to be fully piped. The 2 neighbors to the north that sit adjacent to the storage units will not be affected. They'll probably end up with more water or have a better access to the water that will access their property. Another couple things we've done with the city's blessing, we had the last gentleman here with the car wash. We've already went ahead and had a traffic study done. I have it here with me. In fact, I picked it up at UDOT about 2 hours ago. It's been done for a while, but I didn't get up there until now. I just want to let you know that we do have full approval from UDOT to access Redwood Road with this property. I'd be happy to field any questions you may have, or if any members of the audience would like to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Any questions for the applicant this evening at this point? We'll reserve some time for you if anything comes up after the public.
Thank you very
hearing.
much.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Ms. Elgin, you have this item also?
Yes, I think Mr. Cannon did a very good job explaining the project. I would point out that this did come to you last December for the subdivision, or for the rezone of the Senior Housing Overlay District, and you did recommend approval for the City Council at that time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Elgin? Commissioner Green.
So I just wanted to make sure the way the street goes in, and we've got the dead end to the north and whatever you want to call that to the west, the hammerhead or whatever, does that meet all the requirements for the fire code, for fire code turnaround and all of that other stuff that you guys worry about that I can't figure out?
Yes, it does.
Very succinct, to the point. Thank you. Let's open up the public hearing, please. If anyone would like to speak on Sunset Villas, please feel welcome to come forward at this time.
My name is Michael Sorich, and we own the property just to the north of this development. And I have 3 questions. One was, the first question was already kind of answered about the irrigation ditch, because we want to make absolutely sure in writing that that ditch will be piped and we will have access to irrigation water on our property and on the Coombs property just north of us. North of that it's all commercial, and so we don't care about that, but we do want water, our irrigation water, we want that available to us. Number 2, when you look at the map, the easement up here, or not the easement, but there's that little 3-foot section between our property and the property in question, and there's another home right there, and it's about a foot away from our property. There's been a fence line that was put in by my father back in 1950 something, and we want to make sure that that fence line becomes the property line for that development, so that there's not going to be any changes according to those little jagged things. And the one yellow line there should represent the property line all the way from Redwood Road all the way to the back of the property. And if they have to do a quick claim deed and all that, that's fine. But we just want to make sure that that fence line becomes the property line between the 2 developments. And then the third question pertains to the dead-end street. It says for future development. I'd just like to ask, what are their future plans?
Great, thank you very much. We'll cover that. Would anyone else like to speak on this item?
This came up with the last couple developers. It came up before I even owned my property. I'm the one below the orphan. I feel like I'm in a little tug of war, but it seems like it's not just me, it's not just my neighbor to the south, but it's the neighbor to the north and the 3 properties to the west. I know that we've had boundary issues, and I know you said that you take care of the boundaries, but it seems like, at least from what I've heard, nothing's been done or nothing's been addressed. If those boundaries are the fence lines, or if they're not the fence lines, but I just think that it should be taken care of before we have 17 additional people that we have to get in a room and agree about what our title says versus what our fences say. That's my concern. Thanks.
And could you please state your name and
Oh,
address for the record?
sorry.
No problem.
It's Jessica Pilling, and I live at 7258 South Redwood. I live in that little guy right there.
Great.
And I guess, yeah, we weren't able to come to agreement about the back of our properties, but if there was anything like stepping utilities that we could do to open that up somehow, I'm talking about the future development, that would be great, but whatever. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Seeing no further takers, we'll close the public comment section. And Ms. Elgin, would you like to speak to anything of that? I know some of this might be outside the scope of the application at this point, but we had the specific ideas of the ditch, piping with the irrigation water, the fence, property line, potential future development in the area.
The issues with the irrigation ditch, that could become part of the development agreement, should you choose to condition that, I believe.
That's a right, a water right, and the city will require that pipe to be put in. We're not gonna stop anybody's flow of irrigation with any development, because there's just no way, and Duncan, correct me if I'm wrong, by law, we have to, that water has to flow in a pipe to the properties that have rights for that. And so those rights predate most of the development in this area, so.
That's correct, yeah, we can't do anything to impede those water rights.
Thank you. Anything from engineering, Mr. Nelson?
I was just gonna say it's typical that when a development comes through and they're, especially if they're developing residential, that it is a requirement that they pipe any irrigation ditches and that they produce some kind of a written acknowledgement or permission from those, from the ditch, whoever represents the ditch users. Generally, each of those ditches have a weir master, if you will, that can speak on behalf of that. And so we will usually get that in writing.
Great, thank you, because we appreciate public comment, and so we've had our planner, our engineer, our legal counsel, and our city planner and associate planner speak to that. And please bear in mind the words preliminary. So this is the preliminary subdivision plat and preliminary development plan, and so things will progress in phases, and certainly all of these will continue to be addressed. Thank you for the comments. Mr. Cannon, would you like to add anything additional to address any of these issues?
I sure would, and thank you. We've been very conscious from the beginning, and you guys have kind of helped us out there as well. We have absolutely no intent whatsoever of impeding anyone's private property rights with or without a fence being there. We want these people to get along with these people, and from what we understand, one of these property lines is, it may be impacting one of the dwellings, and so we're going to work, in fact, in the plan you see in front of you, whatever we need to do to deed that property over at no charge to the property owners to make sure that they're both comfortable with the end result. But to the best of our ability, which I don't know what that is yet. We don't own the property yet. We are going to purchase it, but we can't do anything until that happens. But that will be simultaneously done based on the recommendation of the administration and how they direct us to do that. I also wanted to point out that we're getting really good with UDOT and anticipating their requests. And I wanted you to know that both on the Parker project over here, as well as Sunset Villas, we have went ahead to alleviate the traffic congestion onto Redwood Road. And we're not telling these people that they have to use our road to access Redwood Road. But at the time of when they do sell their homes, the new residents will have and the existing residents also will have the right and the ability to access that new road that's going to be put onto Redwood Road to further alleviate the traffic congestion as it's created.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Any other questions for the applicant? Thanks for the additional information.
You're welcome. And again, I'm not bragging here, but I know water rights probably better than any of you. I'm on 3 state water boards and the president of that canal company, and that water will make it to their properties. That will not be hindered at all, because I wouldn't let that happen to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any thoughts, commissioners? Commissioner Drain.
I've got one more question sitting here. When we do a subdivision plat like this, is there a survey done on that to set boundary lines, or is it just drawn on the plat?
There's a surveyor certificate on the plat, so it is it is surveyed, and the surveyor the description is shown on the plat, and that's how we arrive at the boundary lines. And the surveyor, there's a surveyor's acknowledgement and a stamp, their professional seal.
Okay, so just to follow up with that, if there's questions on the boundary lines and property ownership, the survey should help solve that, and then if there's any issues, those would be negotiated between the 2 property owners.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of times, you get 2 abutting properties, and you have 2 surveyors, and the same boundary line that they share don't line up according to the description. So those do have to be resolved generally on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Drain. Commissioner Luthi.
Thank you. Just to kind of go along with that, I've seen it go many a times that if there's an existing fence, that becomes the property line no matter what it legally says. So you do have a stance there if it becomes a problem to be able to force the issue. Many a time that's happened. So, but it sounds like he's completely willing to work with the situation.
Commissioner England.
And I agree, I'm not an attorney, but I believe it's a 20 or 25 year, as long as it's been the recognized property line, that fence, that mark of delineation that does get adopted formally.
Any thoughts, Mr. Murray, from a legal standpoint?
I think the best thing to do under the circumstances is to have the owners on both sides agree to it now, and then just make sure that whatever that boundary line is on this plat matches, either matches the current description of the adjacent property, or that adjacent property owner sign the plat or sign a deed to make it match up. This is the opportunity to make it square up, is when you're doing a plat. So I would say the developer of this subdivision and the adjacent landowner just need to agree on that line, and if that line is the fence line, let's make sure that the legal description on this plat matches that line. That's the solution.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, or I'll entertain a... Oh, okay. Yes, we've closed the public comment section. We apologize. Do we want to suspend the rules?
I would move that we suspend the rules.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Yeah. Second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? We'll vote. All in favor, aye? Aye. Aye. Unanimous. Please come forward. We don't want to hold anyone back, and we do have some time. Well, not that there's a definitive end time, but... And I agree, Commissioner Commissioner England and Commissioner Luthia, I've seen that too, where again, I don't know how many years, but I've seen property, 7 years,
Yeah,
just.
what
the
you're
fence
referring
is
to
already
is
there.
adverse possession or prescriptive easement type legal theories. But like I say, the best solution is to not rely on those legal doctrines and to simply make it match on the plat. So if that's the preferred method.
Thank you, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. If you could please state your name and address for the
Okay,
public record.
I'm Linda Sorich, and the property is joint with my brother-in-law and his wife and my husband and I. It's 7254 South. So we're the one right next to Jessica. This has been going on since my father-in-law bought the property in 1944. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So we as a family, the four of us, have discussed this, and Mr. Cannon was very nice yesterday, and I shared that we are not going to get in no tug of war and stuff like that, but we do have some requests that we would, again, like to reaffirm, because my brother-in-law wasn't able to speak to Mr. Cannon yesterday about the survey, about our intentions, and the quick claim deed he's going to do was still, he said we didn't have to decide which name, this or that right away. So I just wanted to let all of you know, when you suggested we get that taken care of this evening, we would first like to talk to Mr. Cannon and let him know our thoughts and what we would like, a survey and such. So that's all I wanted to share for right now.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
We appreciate your input, and it's nice everyone's being amicable. Truly, West Jordan is the city of the good neighbor. Commissioner Green.
Can I make a motion?
Please.
I'll be the motion guy tonight. Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report on the evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission approve the preliminary subdivision plat and preliminary site plan, forward a positive recommendation of the City Council for the approval of the preliminary development plan, subject to conditions approval 1 through 6, with an additional 7th that I will make here in a second, for Sunset Villa on 2.78 acres containing 17 lots at 7292 South Redwood Road, with condition 7 being that all legal descriptions are negotiated and agreed upon by the property owner and the adjoining neighbors prior to the approval of the final subdivision plat.
Commissioner England. A motion by Commissioner Green, a second by Commissioner England. Any discussion to the motion? Let's please vote. All in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed with nay? Motion carries unanimously 7-0. Thank you for the in-depth conversation. We want to make sure all the ducks are in a row and we do things the right way, as expeditiously as possible, but without missing anything that we need to discuss. So thank you. With that in mind, we will jump right into item number 4.
Oh, please.
I thought we were going to flip.
Oh, don't spring into action too soon. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hatch. With altitude.
This stuff's bouncing all over.
With Altitude Trampoline Park, 3813 Centerview Drive, conditional use permit for recreation and entertainment indoor in an SC3 zone, the Dimension Group, Mike Oxley, is the applicant. And he's not going to be here, the Dimension Group. Mr. Forsyth.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I'll try and do the best job I can based on the information I've been given by the applicant. So essentially, this is a trampoline park that's going to be going in the central commercial area of Jordan Landing, just south of the movie theater complex. So as you can see here on the map, this is located in an SC3 zone, which is our regional commercial zone. And basically the purpose of this zone is to provide large commercial services, shopping centers, entertainment, things of that nature to a population of about 100,000 people. And so with this being a major indoor recreation an entertainment use. We feel that that's appropriate for this area, and Jordan Landing's pretty well set up to accommodate larger counts of traffic, larger counts of parking, and so we, looking at other places in West Jordan, we feel that this is the perfect spot for it in the city. So the building they're going to be occupying is the former 24-hour fitness building. So with this being, with the previous use being a gym, it should be a pretty easy transition from that previous use to this new one. The applicant isn't proposing, to my knowledge, any exterior changes. The only changes would be to the interior, other than signage, of course. But we've included conditions of approval to make sure that they go through the proper channels to get those signs approved. So in terms of impacts, there's really not a whole lot of impacts that we're anticipating. Noise shouldn't be an issue considering this is surrounded by commercial development. And then parking and traffic, you will see quite a bit more traffic than you would, say, a retail shopping center. The applicant has stated in their letter of intent that they're planning about using 80 parking stalls. So with the parking requirements in the ordinance, they're required to have about 324, which, based on our experience and expertise, seems a bit excessive. But taking that into account with the Chase Bank and the Spirit Halloween buildings just to the east there, they should have enough parking to meet that. They will spill over a little bit, but with the Spirit Halloween being just a temporary use for the majority of the year, that site will actually meet the parking requirements. So in going back to traffic impacts, you know, they will have will be competing for some use of that Centerview Way with the movie theater, but with the movie theater, you tend to have traffic impacts more in certain times of the day all at once, particularly when movies get out. But with an indoor recreation use, you're going to have people filtering in and out. So we feel that that shouldn't be too impactful. And even if it is, there's at least 2 accesses on Centerview Way, 1 access on Plaza Center Drive, and 2 accesses on the south part of the property where it connects to that Lowe's access there. So that can be used as an alternative in case traffic becomes an issue. So based on these findings and the others explained in the staff report, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit for Altitude Trampoline Park.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Commissioner Luthi.
Yeah, I just want to make clear, they're planning on using the entire building. They're not planning on having another business in this building.
To my knowledge, yes. There is a small space for a business that's been used as a tanning salon, but I believe the majority would be used by the trampoline park.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Yeah, their fitness inside the building. See what I did there? 24-hour fitness. I know that one was even worse than the jump.
You have to explain the joke, you shouldn't have made it.
I know, it doesn't really work, does it? So let's open up this item for public comments. Anyone at all? Yeah. Okay, we'll close the public comment section and we'll bounce it back to the commission. Okay, no more jokes. Commissioner Green.
Based on the information and findings set forth in this staff report and on the evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit for Altitude Trampoline Park located at 3813 West Centerview Drive in an SC3 zone, subject to the conditions of approval listed on page 2 of the staff report.
Commissioner Hanson.
I'll second that.
A motion by Commissioner Green, a second by Commissioner Hanson. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 7-0, bringing us to our final item on the agenda, text amendment to amend the 2009 West Jordan Code sections 13-12-6C.1, 13-12-6C.5, 13-5B, as in boy, -7D.2, and 13-5B-7D.3 regarding residential parking requirements. With citywide applicability, the City of West Jordan is the applicant, with Mr. Gardner.
So this request was made by code enforcement. There was some confusion on parking materials in front yards and then parking of watercraft and recreational vehicles. And I'll cover the parking materials. There was some discrepancy in their mind, or some confusion about, they were at one time telling people that anything that they parked in the front yard had to be on asphalt or concrete. Well, where the provision was that it would allow gravel, but that was only for a watercraft trailer, recreational vehicle, or motor home. And so what this ordinance does is it states that required parking, which the Planning Commission approves always with any new home, and this is, I need to back up and say this is only for R1 districts. It's not for RM or any commercial or industrial. It's R1 or R, not even rural residential. It's just completely for R1 districts. The confusion was that, well, let me continue by saying that the Planning Commission always approves required parking with a new home, which is 2 parking spots in a 2-car garage, because we require with every new home a garage here. And we also require that all driveways leading to that garage be asphalt or concrete. Nobody makes driveways out of asphalt that I'm aware of in this city, so they all end up being concrete, which is perfectly fine. But other parking is the motorhome, the boat, the watercraft, whatever, snowmobile, recreational vehicle, and if it's in the side yard or rear yard, I guess could also be a vehicle that someone is not necessarily using at the moment. Now, the intent of this ordinance is not that someone gravel their entire front yard. We're still the limitation of they need to have 50% of the front yard landscaping, and if they're parking on it in a graveled area, that's not part of the landscaping. And so I believe the allowing other parking on gravel in the front or side yard really will not affect anything different than what's going on in the city now. And then you heard Mr. Quayle's comments in the pre-meeting that about the 14 consecutive days of parking or someone living in a trailer for 14 consecutive days. Well, we've had these issues crop up on these larger lots where people are putting in these little mobile home parks in their backyard, and I guess it's to bring extra income, and this is really disrupting some areas of the city, and code enforcement didn't feel like they had the teeth at that time to make that. And I do believe that there's plenty of county health rules associated with that, but getting the health department to come out and enforce it sometimes can be an issue because they're busy and they've got a lot of work on their hands. So I think this is a way to help take care of that if the Planning Commission feels like that's an issue. And then the other issue is allowing a boat or a trailer or a motorhome or a recreational vehicle to be parked 3 feet from the sidewalk or property line, rather than 10 feet. Now, that was my change, again, on the request from code enforcement, because they felt like that that is something that really wasn't enforced, but I felt at that time, and I instructed them that I thought that that would probably not pass with the council, and I would like to hear what the planning commission feels about that and all of these changes at this time. So do you have any questions of me before you get into?
Commissioner Green.
I'll go first. I was gonna say I'm gonna jump on this one first, but that was last agenda item. So you said this only applies to R1. I'm just and I just want to make sure that we clarify this, because the title of 1312-5 is parking lot location, and the one that we're going to make D instead of E says parking restrictions in single family and duplex areas. So that should apply to all single family homes, including rural residential and anything, correct? Or am I off base here?
And I don't have the complete ordinance in front of me, but there is, in rural residential and agricultural zones, gravel can be used as a driveway and a parking area.
Okay.
They don't even have to have a concrete driveway. And so, you know, probably the duplex area, that was left in simply because there's some statement about having driveways in duplexes to rear yards and stuff like that. And so
I just want to make sure that
if
we're dealing with the code, that if we're talking about generally single and I know that there's the driveway difference, but if they had a house that didn't have the 300-foot setback that a lot of those rural residentials do, that I wish I had a front yard that big. But if they were up front closer to the street and had the great big backyard, they would still be subject to making sure that the RVs and everything are parked to the side or to the rear, so that we'd have the same issue under this ordinance. That's all I want to make, is that if we're going to do that, I think it needs to apply to across the board to the city, and I think it does based on the ordinance, but I just wanted to get your take on that.
Okay.
And to clarify, when we're talking about parking it either on cement or 4-inch deep gravel, how large does that base need to be? Does it need to be as long as the vehicle? For instance, I know some people that just have, you know, a squared foot of gravel that the tire is actually on, and therefore it's technically parked on gravel. Does that make sense? And so it's it doesn't delineate things like that in here, and so I can see how, you know, we're trying to shore this up, but I guess there's always going to be something that can skirt by what's written. So, for instance, could you speak to that item?
Yeah, and that's been an issue with code enforcement also, because people will say, well, I'll park it on gravel, and then they'll put gravel under the tires, and code enforcement said that's not the intent of the ordinance. It needs to be the entire area under the vehicle. So it is an issue. I can clarify that in the ordinance, though. I'd be happy to do that, and that's not a big deal. I'd be happy to say the parking area has to be under the entire vehicle. And that, by the way, is also a county health rule, because it stops breeding of vermin and that if there's gravel underneath the entire vehicle, if it sits there, because if it's grass grows up and talls, then rats and mice can live in that. But so I'll clarify that.
Right, because I just, my mind just keeps thinking about, you know, we're trying to shore this up, but there's always going to be someone that is able to manipulate the intention of it. I think I shared this in a meeting prior. When I lived in France, I used to see many people driving their motorcycles with a helmet on their arm. And I wondered why, and then I found out that the law said that you have to wear a helmet while you're driving a motorcycle, but it doesn't specify what part of your body you need to wear the helmet on, so they would just drive around with it on their arm.
Only in France.
Yeah, exactly, so. Paris.
Oui.
I know there were a couple of other issues brought up in the pre-meeting. Would anyone like to get those on record for the minutes to help City Council? Commissioner England?
Maybe I'm running into the same agenda items. Have we opened this up for public comment yet? And do we need to do that first and then delve in, or?
Thank you. Yes, let's open this up for public comment. If you would like to speak on this item, please feel free to come forward. Okay. Thank you. We'll close the public comment section. Back to us. Commissioner England.
The issue I have with it is we have this opportunity right here, right now, to kind of beautify the city, and we're choosing to take this 3-foot setback from the sidewalk. I can think of several different reasons why that's not desirable. You know, being a resident of West Jordan, having neighbors with RVs, you know, the sight lines while backing out of my driveway, not seeing kids, just unsightly. I'm not in favor of the 3-foot. I really would prefer to go 10-foot. Don't know if I'm alone there, but I think we have the opportunity here.
So what about greater than 10 feet?
Or greater than 10 feet. 10 feet at the minimum for the.
Okay, that's what it is now, so.
Correct.
So, okay.
So that's my thoughts on it, and I know there was some good discussion in the pre-meeting, so I know others have other thoughts.
And if 50% of a front yard needs to be grass, or landscaped, sorry, I guess I should say landscaped, it seems like it'd be pretty hard to put a vehicle of that size, you know, a trailer, RV motorhome in the front yard, but still I'm not a fan of things in the front yard. I mean, to me, that just smacks of, what's that, sorry?
No, I was coughing, sorry.
Commissioner Green.
So, I know where you're going, and I think I have the same concerns, is that if we allow those vehicles to come out that far, I think it creates an issue with the sight lines, safety, sidewalks, those other kinds of things. I know where other people are coming from. I noticed that a neighbor is in my neighborhood. They ripped out their whole side yard so they could put a brand new trailer in. And I think because they want it in front of the fence that they've already got, that's probably at the back of the house, I'm not sure that they could get 10 feet from the sidewalk to the trailer now, because that would encroach on their backyard and some of those kind of things. But I think I tend to agree with Commissioner England more. We should be more concerned about pushing those back, and if that goes back behind the house or has to encroach on the backyard a little bit, that's the cost of doing business with having that long of an RV. Just because I agree with you. I think there are safety issues and some aesthetics issues that would cause issues here. My other concern on this one is, I know why we want to change number 3 to have no more than 14 consecutive and change that to 14 calendar days per year, where somebody is occupying using a trailer as guest residence, particularly when it requires that all setback requirements are met. But I'm concerned about the vagueness of the 14 days, just because we're talking about, the way that I read this, we're talking about 14 cumulative days, not, and so, and I know code enforcement doesn't go out and actively seek to find out if people are living in trailers that are parked on the side of the house. It's more complaint driven, but I'm wondering how that's actually gonna be enforced, and if it would withhold any scrutiny. I mean, you cite them and say you were there 15 days. How would we approve that, and how would that be any different than what we're dealing with today with the being set up? I mean, people lie and people can make stuff up, and I'm just wondering how this would be enforceable given that those dates without any, I don't know. I'm still thinking about it, but.
Are you referring to the 14 days per calendar year or whatever? Yeah, I mean, what it really boils down to is even though we're on a reactive rather than a proactive code enforcement approach due to lack of personnel, it's just that once a case is reported and there is somebody monitoring it, then at that point it prevents somebody from playing the game of, as we were talking about in the pre-meeting, being there for 13 days, leaving for a couple of days, coming back for another 13 days. It does allow neighbors, or once it's on the radar, those code enforcement officers, they can't be everywhere all the time, but they can focus on a few places during a short period of time. It gives them the teeth to actually enforce it. Otherwise, the way it's currently written, there's not as much of an ability to put a stop to somebody who's actively, living in one of those. So that's kind of the way you have to look at it, is does it give you some teeth if and when someone is actively monitoring it?
Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Number one, I don't like the idea of a trailer, a boat, anything in a front yard. I think it makes the neighborhood look tacky. I think that we should stick with it, maybe a side driveway if people have those. Some yards aren't big enough to even have that. And I don't think we're doing our city a favor by allowing people to use their front yard. I also agree with Commissioner England that 3 feet, we don't even allow that with driveways next to one another. They have to be so far apart for safety reasons. If children are walking along or something, you can't see them. Or if you're pulling out of your driveway and there's a 50-foot motorhome there, you're not going to be able to see past it. The other thing is the state is really pushing, in most cities, zero-scaping. That's all gravel. That's no grass. That's all gravel. So they could park on the whole front yard. I mean, 50%, but it doesn't matter where they put that 50% because it's all gravel. So I think that's another problem we're facing with this type of thing. Thank you.
Commissioner Luthi.
Thank you. Quite honestly, I actually agree the fact that I don't like it in the front yard at all. I mean, other than maybe a 24-hour period of unloading and loading or cleaning and uncleaning, I liked it better when the ordinance, we were talking about this in the pre-meeting, when the ordinance was that it had to be behind the face of the front house. I wouldn't take it down to 3 feet.
Thank you. Any other conversation?
I'm going to ask the question, when we talk about allowing RVs and all this other stuff on a side yard, what would happen if instead of having the 10-foot, 3 feet, whatever foot restriction we have, what would happen if we said that the parking couldn't occur beyond the facade of the home, the front of the home, that it had to be the front of the home and behind, so that the maximum far forward is the front edge of the home, so that it's actually the side not sticking out. I'm just wondering if that's not, that would actually be easier to be enforced. It would actually, I think, accomplish a couple of things that we've talked about. I'm just wondering what would happen if we did something like that.
Well, I know that some RV strips don't go all the way to the backyard, that they are in front of the house. I'm just trying to, I'm thinking of some that I know that don't go all the way back.
Yeah, but
so I actually couldn't.
I think the reason why they don't go all the way back is because people would put a fence there
Thank you. Commissioner Luthi.
Once upon a time, it was the face of the yard because I grew up here, and I remember my mom getting called because she had left our boat out for a full weekend, and code enforcement came, and code enforcement said, you can't leave your boat out for the full weekend. It's got to be behind the house. So this isn't something that's a brand new idea. This was what West Jordan used to have. That used to be the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
So in the minutes, they're in your packet from August 24th, 2004. Oddly enough, they were arguing the same thing 14 years ago. It says, Council Member Summers felt that it's not and one of the council members was parking in an R18 zone. Sometimes in the side yard, there's not enough area to park a recreational vehicle in the side yard. And Council Member Summers felt that it's not up to the council to provide everyone with a small lot, a place to park a recreational vehicle. He reviewed what most of his complaints were regarding. He recommended the staff that the setback be at least 10 feet and that safety issues be addressed. So they were still arguing. It's still behind the setback, and so, yeah, they were arguing the same thing. And at that point, in 2004, as Nicole said, it was required to be in the side yard and not in the front yard, so it was required. But then they chose to put it at least 10 feet. So that's where the current ordinance comes from at this time. So.
Well, and I think.
And there was an argument at that time that code enforcement at that time wanted to have it 2 feet in back of the sidewalk. So I guess what goes around comes around. So.
Well, it seems like what we're saying, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, so we can kind of encapsulate this and get a motion, is that we're in favor of city beautification, so to speak, and not smacking of car lots or having things parked on landscape, that we want them buffered with fencing, behind a home, side of the home, certainly not in front of the home. I haven't heard anyone say that the front's okay. So we're saying to strike the front, and we're also saying that the side yard should be set back at least to match the front of the house. Commissioner Luthi?
I don't know, you said something about fencing. I don't think that fencing's required in front of the side yard. I just think that the idea of putting it back behind the facade of the house is a good one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Commissioner Hatch?
Thank you. My question is, can we at this point, when you have a majority of homeowners who have an RV and they have it parked on their side yard, if we change the ordinance, let's just say the city council goes along with it, then at that point we have 50,000 residents that have to move their RV to the back of their home or the side of the facade of their home? How does that work? I mean, would they be grandfathered in, or would this just be a mass chaos?
That's when we start an RV parking complex.
I don't think they would be grandfathered, or I don't think it would be mass chaos. Julie's not agreeing with me because she's giving me a bad look right now. But I think for safety purposes, I would leave it at the 10 feet, so that would stop the mass chaos. I think it becomes more difficult, then it becomes wishy-washy. Well, it was 10 feet, now it's the back of the front of the facade. And so I think in 2004 is when they kind of put the camel's nose in the tent, if you want to say. And so, but I'll do whatever the planning commission instructs me to do. 'Cause I don't have a trailer. I like my front yard. So.
Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you. I am fortunate on this matter because I do have an acre, and so anything can be parked in my back. I don't have to have it on my side or on my lawn. But I'm unfortunate enough to have a drug house kitty corner from me. And there's cars in the front yard, there's cars in the side yard, there's cars on the street constantly. The police are aware of it. They have to have a reason to go in, which they don't have at this time. They have before gone in, and I believe a little prostitution is going on in the back, and motorhomes, campers, that type of thing. So I don't want the rest of my street, which is a dead-end street, to have this same mess with motorhomes or boats or trailers or anything, a car, anything on the front lawn. I think that house right there ruins the neighborhood. And I've lived there for 52 years. So it just started when this happened. Everybody else is very good, but I don't want it to continue to become an issue. So I think the 10-foot is wise, but I don't believe parking on the front of the house within the yard is a good idea, because I think it ruins the neighborhood.
Thank you. And why is it recommended to strike that the vehicles must meet current licensing requirements? It says it can't be in a state of disrepair, but it seems like, wouldn't we want things to be current?
Some trailers don't need to be licensed.
But if it doesn't need to be licensed, that's okay, but I'm just thinking of boats, RVs, cars that aren't current on their licensing, don't have the stickers. Well, don't we want that?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, Commissioner Drain.
I'm going to tell you that I'd be against the current licensing restrictions. And here's why. I have a trailer. I have a little pop-up tent trailer. Works perfectly fine. But I don't register it every year because I don't use it. I keep it in, I maintain it. It's literally my 72-hour kit. The other thing is that if I back my trailer in, I will tell you, if I back my trailer in, the license plate's parked to the rear. Now, I know code enforcement doesn't have enough time on their hands to check every trailer, but if they decided to, are they getting to a point where now they've crossed the front of because my trailer's on the side of my yard and extends to the back. They're starting to get to the back of the yard where I'm not sure that if they're just checking a licensing agreement, they don't have probable cause. And I think you're getting into the curtilage area of the Fourth Amendment, and they got no business going back there to verify licensing on trailers. And so I think that the more that we stay out of that, the less likely we're going to have some legal issues with the Fourth Amendment and a couple of things like that. So I'm actually in favor of having the current licensing restrictions not in the ordinance. What I was going to say was, the other thing that I was going to say is that in the original section, and I think I know where Commissioner Hansen's going. In the original verbiage of the ordinance, it said that you couldn't store vehicles in the front yard, and under this one in section 1 now, we're allowing it to be stored in the front or side yard. And the more that I've heard the discussions, we never allowed the front yard. It was always, and I know this is kind of a really weird distinction, but what's the front yard versus the side yard? And I don't know how to define it, but I know where she's going is that, if somebody has an RV pad and they pour that additional driveway to park, it always leads to the side yard. It's never in their front yard. So I'm wondering how we define side yard, and I'm looking for some creative ideas so that we can do exactly so that we keep the ordinance the way it is to say, no, you can't park them in the front yard. The intent is to the side of your driveway, to the side of your house, and it might stick out a little bit. And that's a really technical legal description, isn't it? Kind of the side of the driveway and kind of but I don't know how to say that, but I know where she's going, and I think that I agree with that, but I don't know how to word it.
I think one way we could is just say that the trailers and boats and whatever are allowed to be stored in the side yard, but they can extend into the front yard as long as it's no closer than 10 feet. Does that work?
Commissioner Hansen?
I agree with Mr. Gardner. Your side yard is determined by the zone in which you live. Your front yard is determined by the zone in which you live. So like the zone that I live in, I have a 10-foot side yard on each side of my house. I have a 30-foot front setback. And so, but I'm in the RR agricultural. And so it just would depend on the zone you live in is what your side yard would be. Also, you have to stop and think of if we pass something like this, allowing it in the front yard, a lot of HOAs are not going to allow that. And so, you know, and the city doesn't control HOAs. That the HOA has to be controlled by its own body, but you're going to have a lot of complaints if there's CCNRs or HOAs that is not going to allow this. So, once again, I am against the front yard, side yard. If it's even at the front facade of the house, that doesn't bother me as long as it's 10 feet back from the sidewalk.
Commissioner Hatch?
Thank you. I am an HOA board member of an HOA, and our CCNRs just will not allow RVs parking unless they're behind the house, out of the way. And our home doesn't allow it. If we wanted an RV, we would have to go to a storage unit, not in West Jordan. But I just can't see that being an issue with an HOA at all.
And the HOA CCNRs can't be they can't be contrary to city code.
They can be stricter, but they.
No, they can be much more restrictive,
but
much
they
more
can't
restrictive.
go against city code. Commissioner Green?
Mr. Gardner, I'm wondering, when you're talking about the what you were talking about with that side yard thing, I wonder if we could just say something primarily side yard that can extend out, or something like that, you know, it's, so that it's primarily side yard. And maybe that helps with the wording, particularly along the lines of what you said as well.
Yeah. What I would like to, and Duncan and Julie, maybe you can help me on this, is what I would like to do is retool this and bring it back to the Planning Commission in 2 weeks. However, it's been noticed for the City Council for the 22nd. Duncan, how would we go? Would she just need to renotice that in the newspaper? Because it's only a newspaper notice. Because I think there's a lot of good dialogue here, and I feel like it's, out of respect to the Planning Commission, I'd like to go through and redo it and bring it back so they can have a clean recommendation to the City Council, not, well, we want this and this and this, but we didn't have time because I scheduled a public hearing when I shouldn't have. And
So 2 issues, Planning Commission public hearing, you've met that requirement today. If it's not substantially different, which it isn't, and plus it's based on today's discussion, you obviously don't need another Planning Commission public hearing the next time. You could just have it as a business item. So, and yeah, as far as the public hearing at the council level, yeah, we just obviously have to renotice it for the following meeting, but should be fine.
And I would rather do that. I'd rather bring it back to the Planning Commission and so that, because I'm hearing what you're saying, but I want to put it on paper and make sure that's exactly what, because that's very important to me, because I don't want to take something to the council. Well, I think that's what they meant, but I'm not really sure. And so, you know what I mean? So that's what I'd like to do is, you know, I'll take any more comments, so there's no problem, but I'd ask you for the motion tonight would be to continue it to the next meeting. So
I think that's especially prudent where it wouldn't be 100% clear what they're voting on. There's too many possible little changes.
Right, and as the city council is trying to filter through the copious minutes that Julie's taking, it kind of loses the she says yes, kind of loses the intent sometimes. And then just to clarify, on the top of the page, D doesn't say anything about all vehicles. So are we talking about cars as well? Cars, trucks, Do we want that to
Yes.
extend to everything? Because
And
on
then-
number 2, it says all vehicles, and I think we don't want cars parked on front
And
lawns.
if you
or
want that changed, I can also change that.
that would be my opinion, to make it all vehicles, inclusive of watercraft, trailers, campers, RVs, motorhomes, cars, trucks.
So include all vehicles or take all vehicles out?
Well, I would include all vehicles.
Okay, all right.
Great, thank you. So would someone like to offer a motion for that?
Well, can I, before we do that, can I just add one more suggestion? And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be easier just to do something that defines, as if you're gonna rework this, is where, where it talks location of watercraft, trailers, campers, RVs, motorhomes, vehicles, yada, 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 herein called vehicle or something, and then just use that term consistent through, so that you've just got a definition line of what we're talking about, and then everything else, you just use that same term, so you don't have to repeat motorhome or travel trailer or watercraft, trailers, campers multiple times like we've done here. I'm just wondering if there's a way to do that better.
I will give it my best shot. I did graduate from the University of Utah, so I can't promise anything.
I did, and I can't add, so.
There may be a definition that's already in our code that we can use
Sure,
as well.
because I mean,
Yeah.
someone could say, well, what about my snowmobile? It didn't say it in there. You know, that's not watercraft, it's not a recreational vehicle. So, we have to get everything in there
My
once.
Razor, my side-by-side.
Right, so let's put it all in there once and then just reference it. Commissioner Quinney?
The weeds got really, really thick here, didn't they, tonight? I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion that we kick this. Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion, then go ahead and add it, that we kick this down the road 2 weeks.
Commissioner Luthi?
I will happily second that, except for I need to clarify something. If we're saying all vehicles, be careful with that, because now whether we're discussing behind the house or we're talking about 10 feet, you're talking about your teenage driver and where they're gonna park. So I don't know that you want it to say all vehicles. I think you want it to limit what was labeled in D and have the other have it take out. I think you're opening a whole different can of worms if we're talking about your teenage driver than if we're talking about your RV.
Yeah, because there is an existing, I just found it, a definition in 13-2-3 for motor vehicle, and it includes obviously automobiles and trucks in addition to all the other things there. So you probably want a completely different definition, right, for all of these other things other than conventional cars. Is that kind of what you're saying? Okay.
Motorcycles, things like that. Okay. Vespas. Any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Quinney?
I was just gonna say that I was accepting of her change.
Thank you. Any discussion to the accepted change motion? Let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 7-0 to readdress this in 2 weeks on the 21st. Is there anything else that we need to discuss before we adjourn? Yes, motion to adjourn. Any opposition to that motion? We stand adjourned until the 21st of August. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good seeing you, Judy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your experience always helps out. I mean, I wouldn't have thought, 50 foot this.